Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Realm's continuing coverage of the Turning the Tide 9/11 Justice Conference here in Washington, D.C. We have the pleasure of being joined by Matt Campbell, who was one of the presenters here. How did you first come to the 9/11 movement, and what were you here presenting about, Matt?
Well, I lost my brother on the North Tower, 106th floor, and it's been a long journey for me, for obvious reasons. But I'd started to question the events of 9/11 probably the end of October 2001, triggered by an article written by the late John Pilger, who's a journalist, who basically said something on the lines of, or the title of the article was, "This War is a Farce." And I think we were sort of 2-3 weeks into what was going on in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And, it just made me think differently about what had happened. I was still obviously processing and in shock what happened with my brother.
Yeah.
But it was, his basic questions were, what's going on with what we're doing in Afghanistan, and the Brits had obviously joined with America. And it was like, 15 of the 19 alleged hijackers were Saudi. They seem to have done most of their training in Germany and America.
Yep.
What are we doing in Afghanistan?
Yeah.
And the end of the article was as a quote by someone who lost a loved one, and it was like, "This is all being done in my name."
Yeah.
My loved one's name.
Absolutely.
And so I started to question things, and I'd say probably by the summer of the following year, so in 2002, I had started to have some serious doubts. I think early part of that year there was some discussion of starting suits against the Saudis.
Yeah.
So convinced my father to sign up to that lawsuit. So he's with Motley Rice. But then really, a lot of books started to come out between 2003, 2004, and I was very much interested in the sort of paper trail of stuff, intelligence failures and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And really wasn't until I think Building 7 came on my radar. My background's sort of maths and physics and stuff, and that really caught my attention in probably 2007. And by this stage, I'd been down lots of rabbit holes, as you do. And not necessarily just limited to 9/11. But it was probably sort of 2009 that I really started to think, okay, the towers have come down in a similar manner that Building 7, obviously different the way they look, but essentially blown up. So rather oddly, my brother had an inquest, and an inquest in the UK is held in a coroner's court. So it's essentially, who, where, and when, but more importantly, how did that person die? And so he had a joint inquest with 10 people in 2013. It was adjourned for various reasons. And it really was pathetic. They spent a couple of minutes discussing my brother's life and death. It was a cut and paste of from America, about 4 pages, I think, of evidence was put in front of the coroner, and boom, rubber stamp. That was it. There was no actual investigation into how he died, which by law they're supposed to do that. So, at around the sort of same time, I had connected with people in the sort of, you'd call it 9/11 truth in the UK.
Okay.
I'd been living abroad for a while, but I came back, and I started to sort of, I was aware of a lot of the evidence that was out there, but it was like, okay, I'm actually now in contact with some people who had contacts with people in the States, and it was like, okay, maybe there's a route to try and reopen my brother's inquest, because there is a mechanism in UK law that if you've got new evidence, if you can show that it's in the interest of justice, you can reopen an inquest. It's a standard approach that families use. So I started to think, okay, maybe this is a way of doing it, and putting evidence in front of the coroner, forcing them to actually investigate my brother's death. And so, cut a long story short, it took a long time for me to raise the necessary funds, get the energy to go and do this. And in 2021, we submitted a 2,500 page application to the Attorney General, because you have to ask for permission in the UK. So you basically ask the Attorney General for England and Wales permission to reopen an inquest. And normally, if you can show insufficiency of inquiry, if you can show some new evidence which may conceivably, perhaps change the outcome, they would grant a new inquest. It's fairly standard, like I said.
Sure.
A lot of families use this. And after a long wait, they denied it. And so basically the reason why, to get to the chase of why I'm here, it's essentially to talk about my ongoing legal battles with the UK justice system to do with my brother's death, but in an event that happened over in America.
Yeah.
And so I've come here to basically talk about my journey and my battle with the UK authorities.
Yeah.
But it's essentially, I think, the same people all around the world.
The complicity of hiding information or rubber stamping things to just get them through.
I mean, and, they are blocking what I'm trying to do, and, which is to get a proper investigation into my brother's death.
Yeah.
And, it's been a long process.
Yep.
I am now fighting I'd call it almost abstract bits of law that have got nothing to do with the inquest per se. It's to do with, my battle at the moment is there's a kind of archaic power that the Attorney General has, which is they're above the law. You cannot let the judiciary, the courts, examine their decisions where they have to give their permission. And so the section 1B of the Coroner's Act, which is this mechanism to reopen an inquest or ask for permission, is basically they're saying, nah, we're non-justiciable, which basically means you can't get the courts to look at our decision. So we went to the High Court, which is a fairly senior court in the UK, to argue this issue. This was in June this year. And we lost, but there was two judges, and one judge, when he gave the ruling, basically pointed out this is essentially, I'm paraphrasing here because he didn't write this.
Sure.
This is a ridiculous state of affairs. We've got this anomalous situation whereby certain decisions that the Attorney General makes can be scrutinised by the law, and yet something as kind of low level as an inquest is being blocked. And I should make it clear that the Attorney General doesn't play this get out of jail free card all the time. They seem to be using it, or they seem to use it historically when it suits them to cover up some malfeasance or, something another authority or body has done. And I can cite two examples which I gave in my speech, which
Please.
is Bloody Sunday in 1972. The British Army shot dead 13 unarmed civilians.
Yep.
And for decades, the families tried to get, through this mechanism, inquests into their loved one's death. And it wasn't until, I think it was 2010 from memory, there was a sort of a Savile inquiry. And after that, only after that, did any sort of limited prosecutions take place. But the point being there is the families were denied because once they say no, there is no recourse for the families to challenge that decision. Another example is the Hillsborough football stadium, soccer, you call it over here, disaster, where 96 fans were crushed to death.
I remember that.
And they had an inquest a few years after the disaster, and they returned a verdict of accidental death. But key evidence was withheld. They also had an artificial cut-off time that after, I think the disaster happened at 2:50 in the afternoon. At 3:15, they said they wouldn't consider any evidence afterwards because someone ruled that everyone was already dead. And so any testimony from first responders who were trying to resuscitate victims, and there were victims still alive, they basically said, oh, they're brain dead. And so it's very controversial, obviously very upsetting for the families.
Yeah.
And again, the Attorney General used this power to block, to get a new inquest for the families. And again, it wasn't until an independent inquiry, I think it was called the Hillsborough Report, was released, I might get the date wrong, 2012, where they said, okay, no, we need to have new inquests, and they returned a verdict of unlawful killing. The reason why this was covered up, the police were complicit and the government complicit in covering up what went on. So for me, what I'm trying to do is really important, because it's not just for 9/11, which obviously is very important. It's for any family who they might have died suspiciously in a police cell or whatever the circumstance, and you feel that there's been a whitewash, but more importantly, new evidence has come to light.
Yeah.
As it stands at the moment, the Attorney General has this, superpower, which is I'm above the law, and their decisions can't be reviewed. So where I'm at right now is, and literally less than a week ago, we've been given permission to appeal at the Supreme Court, which is the only court in the UK that can actually overturn. That. Yeah, it's not encumbered by previous cases. They know that this is anomalous, which is, like I said, very strong legal term, the way it was described in the ruling. And so my hope is that, first of all, the Supreme Court will grant our hearing. They will essentially undo this ridiculous, archaic, almost regal power that the Attorney General has, which is they're above the law. I mean, the only other person in England who's above the law is King Charles III. I mean, it's that ridiculous.
Yeah.
Without getting into the royals and stuff, and
the ridiculousness of that.
And you don't have that over here.
No, we have it.
Okay, but they're just not blood royal. So, it's in when it gets to the Supreme Court. Let's assume we're there. If they can overturn that, if they can basically rule that, no, I'm sorry, you're in particular. I mean, we're only interested in the inquest.
Yeah,
but Section 13(1)(b) applications, i.e., inquest applications. You cannot hide behind this, we're above the law. If we can get that changed, then I can get my judicial review of the decision, because the Attorney General said no to a new inquest. And I absolutely know, on paper, we win that all day long. We are so far above the fairly minimal bar that and no pun intended, of what you need to do to persuade an Attorney General to have a new inquest, which is essentially show that there was no inquiry. I mean, there was no evidence of an inquiry whatsoever by the UK authorities. And remember that by law they have to do this. And secondly, we have all this new evidence of controlled demolition, of explosives, etc., which obviously wasn't put in front of the coroner. And it deserves to have its day in court. Yeah. And I should add, I mean, I'm a Brit, and I know litigation in the US is all about the money and all the rest of it. I mean, this is litigation it's purely litigating to get a new investigation into my brother's death. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah.
Not seeking settlement, anything, just actual true justice.
Yeah. Yeah. And so because it's a court of law, so it's not just having, because you have coroners here, but they just say whatever the cause of death. We have something similar, but it's actually in a court of law. So there's a lot of,
which is fascinating.
But it's not adversarial. You're not looking to seek blame. Yeah. So it should be just a true fact-finding investigation.
Yeah. We're just trying to get actual data on what killed this person.
Yep.
And that brings about a point of with the Attorney General specifically and the denial of the inquest. Do they have to tell you why they've rejected it? And did they tell you why they rejected it? Those two are, I think, very integral to this.
They don't have to, but it's typical that they would give reasons. They didn't really have any reasons, and the reasons they gave were almost ridiculous, the way that they phrased it. So they would rely on reports that we know wasn't put in front of the coroner. So they're saying, well, the coroner was right in making that decision because of the NIST report. The coroner never looked at the NIST report. There is no evidence. So, they were saying things like that. But they also were just, very disparaging and dismissive of the evidence. But we know they didn't engage with the evidence, because you normally, if you have a refusal letter from, from a decision from the Attorney General, say you said, we found traces of something in someone's blood, and so
or
someone's
on their
died.
Clothing.
Yeah, someone's died in, like I say, a police cell or something. There'd be reasons why they would reject that. Yeah, but they'd give some sort of reasoning. There's no reasoning whatsoever, apart from basically saying they can't imagine. It's too fanciful, this idea that explosives brought the tower down. They also said weird things like, and we don't see how that would change the verdict of how my brother died. And it's like, I think there's a big difference between a building collapsing naturally
explosion.
or being killed by explosives. And
yeah,
I mean, one of the things that I brought up in the
was it
talk,
smoke inhalation that killed him from the fire?
I mean,
something like
I've
that.
done more investigation than the UK authorities. I've had 2 meetings with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, and I asked that very question.
Yeah.
And the only way they can tell is if they had any lung tissue. Which,
Absolutely.
I mean, they don't. So, I mean,
sadly.
So I talked about the degree of fragmentation. So my brother, there's less than 5% of him has been identified.
Yeah.
But that's in 4 tranches: 2002, 2004, 2008, and 2013.
Yeah.
Tiny fragments. But if you look at the degree of fragmentation as a whole, so there's 22,000 body parts. Some 2,700 people died at the World Trade Center. Still 40%, 1,100 aren't identified at all.
There were just 5 that were identified all of 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
From parts that were found on a building almost blocks away.
Yeah.
And it was really fascinating to see that because, it does pull up the hypothesis of how are they blocks away? How are these pieces of them blocks away?
Mm-hmm.
If they were intact and the building fell,
it
would. I mean, you would have to eject the material out of the building in an explosive manner.
So that's very interesting because part of our application points out because although a lot of remains were tagged by GPS, the firefighters I think were primarily involved in tagging where they found stuff. Not everyone position is tagged either with GPS or in a grid. So most of my brother's remains were found and subsequently identified when they were taken away to be sorted.
Okay.
But one part of his remains were found up to 40 meters south of the south side of the North Tower, which again is obviously outside the footprint of it. But we see on video how explosive the event was. But I mean, I've looked at lots of gory photographs of people who have died in earthquakes, and you just don't see that degree of fragmentation. They are squashed, horribly, but essentially whole. You just don't see this degree of fragmentation. So one of the things I talked about yesterday was, you've got about 27% of people have less than 5% identified. If you then factor in the fact that 40% actually haven't been identified at all, you're probably talking around 50% of all the World Trade Center victims have less than 5% of their body, and in a highly fractured, fragmented way. And I've spent a long time researching this, contacting people. I mean, it's insane, what I've had to do over the years as part of my own investigation into my own brother's death. But there was one forensic pathologist who was an expert in the use of explosives and obviously doing the pathology involved with that. And one of the interesting quotes that he made was, you can get complete disintegration of the body and fragmentation. And what drives that is the proximity to the explosives. So again, one of the things that I pointed out yesterday, although you have obviously a lot of people in a very fragmented form on the same floor that my brother was killed on, and this all came out at the inquest, there were 4 victims from that same floor. It was a British conference, which is probably why my brother was there. 3 of them were very fragmented like my brother, less than 5%. But one victim was 86% whole. And so I sort of posed the question yesterday, a rhetorical question, what can cause that range of and degree of fragmentation? Because, I mean, certainly the coroner didn't look into it. But, so some people would think, everyone was pulverized. No, there are whole bodies. I mean,
absolutely. Absolutely.
But, so there's a range. And so part of me just sort of thinks that's a little bit to do with how close you were to the explosives, which I do truly believe were placed in all three towers. And my it is a frustration. It's like, although the inquest is very narrow in scope because it's only specifically dealing with the cause of death, the actual causation of death, and the causation, obviously, the towers coming down. I know there's lots wrong with a lot of the aspects of the official narrative. And, I'm frustrated that there bar a couple of ongoing legal cases which are limited in where they're going in a similar way that mine is limited. So you've got the ongoing trials at Guantanamo Bay.
Yep.
I know they've recently thrown out the plea deals. And I've been there. That's a whole different story. I went there as to view some of the pre-trial. You've got the Saudi lawsuits, which just recently a judge basically dismissed the Saudis. Yeah. I think pretty much final attempt to try and dismiss the case, and thankfully that's been thrown out. So essentially now I'm thinking it can move to discovery and ultimately trial. Now, some people have viewpoints. No, it's a limited hangout, whatever. For me, as flawed as it is, courts are probably our best mechanism to get some sort of truth out and ultimately justice.
Absolutely.
And so my little effort over in the UK is also part of that. And so, okay, they're, to my knowledge, the sort of main three areas of call it litigation that's going on to do with 9/11. But, I personally would like to see a lot more accountability and legal process. For example, just simple things like the intelligence failures and the deliberate protection of, two of the alleged hijackers by the CIA, protecting that information from the FBI. And those very same hijackers are the ones that there's the tremendous paper trail with the Saudi involvement of supporting through intelligence, politicians and government officials, rather, I should say. And again, I want to see that at some point in court. So, okay, the Saudi side I've dealt with, but where's that accountability with the CIA?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that is something that I have held since 9/11. And it's the fact of, at the very least, our government knew something was happening, or people within the government whose job it was to say, hey, something's happening. Let something happen, be it as a means of control or passing laws or reactivating gears of war to allow contractors to make billions. Any one of those reasons. And at the worst case scenario, actors within our government or contractors thereof were an actual part of the planning or implementation of this plan. Both of them are frightening scenarios. I always hope for the lesser of evils. So I'm always hoping the fact that, yes, as proven many times, numerous intelligence failures, numerous things like the Saudi hijackers being protected, even the fact of Saudi hijackers, we didn't go to Saudi Arabia. We went and took care of the 2 CIA assets that had been put into place. We went after Osama bin Laden and the dictator that had been propped up and put into place long, long ago. So that was always very fascinating to me, that but the guys who did it are from there, and we're over here in Afghanistan with CNN showing soldiers protecting poppy fields for some reason.
And this goes back to that article that started me on this path. This war is a farce.
Yeah.
It was just essentially, people who were being killed at that early stage were just innocent people, And,
it's the thing, we talk about it regularly on the show on numerous topics, and it's the scientific idea of when new data comes into the data set, you've got to be willing to re-examine. That's why the last part of the scientific method has an arrow that points back to the first part of the scientific method. It's supposed to be an interminable loop. It never stops. So the idea that either a protectorate like the Attorney General is not willing to accept new data for a case, that's disturbing. The fact that scientists are not willing to, like NIST, are not willing to take into account actual physicists that are like, I'm sorry, that the math you've presented is not the actual math, and this is not what that is. And here's the data that shows it. These things, to me, once again, are disturbing. The fact that people are willing to turn that blind eye on purpose and just totally not look at something because supposedly the case is solved. And the continuance of that, unfortunately for people like you, has led to interminable, almost 25 years of unsettling no justice for your family member and for you guys.
It's what they do. There's two things I was going to say, but just in my mind right now, I mean, in terms of the length of time, I mean, what I've noticed with historical sort of big cases where there is obviously a cover-up and whatever degree of involvement with the authorities, is there's a kind of sweet spot. And it's between basically now, 25 years, through to sort of 30 plus, where there just seems a lot more momentum and movement and the allowing of truth to come forward.
Open mind.
It won't be everything. Yeah. But it definitely starts around this time. So it doesn't surprise me that there's this kind of resurgence. I mean, it has surprised me the particularly with a sitting senator, speaking openly at this event yesterday. And I did actually meet with him the day before. That's encouraging to me. But some people, not many, because people know I've been on this path for a long time. But if I do end up having a conversation with someone, particularly in the UK, why am I doing this? Or, what do you think happened and stuff? And it's like, it's extremely hard to answer that. What I can absolutely say to people, and I say it's obvious, there's an ongoing cover-up going on. And you've got to ask, why is that going on 24 years down the line?
Yeah.
And why, for example, are the UK authorities playing that same game?
Still complicit.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make any sense. And they go, give me an example. Well, okay. Like I said, the Saudi case. Yeah. Look at the 28 pages. Look at the efforts that have gone on by family members, by politicians to get stuff released. The FBI report, the unredacted versions of it released. You can't say to people there's not an ongoing cover-up. NIST not releasing data. Again, what conceivable reason have they got not to release everything?
Look at how long it took the firefighters to be able to get in front of Congress and get anything done.
Yeah.
And they were the ones on ground zero helping. These were first responders who we depended on, and it took that long for them to get any kind of medical care or to be acknowledged for the health issues that they had after. And you bring up a point that I've brought up numerous times yesterday in our coverage, which is that window of acceptance. When things like this happen, the examples I've given were JFK and Roswell, both things that really, really huge standout moments in history that for years the nasty C word of conspiracy has been tied to. But when you get 20, 30 years down the line, there are people and investigators and even people who said that's conspiracy, who many years later have enough time to absorb these things, have enough time to heal from the shock of the moment, things like that, where now new data can come into their data set. They can now accept some new data because it's not as raw. The example, I have numerous family members who for 15 years are still mourning the loss of a family member. We all mourn in a different way. Some people are done mourning in a week and a half. Some people take 30, 40 years to mourn the loss of a loved one. So if that happened to you, it can be hard to accept some of this data, which is it. I mean, you had a bad enough time dealing with the darkness of your family member's death. Now you're and good for you for being able to confront this darkness as it happened in real time for you. I laud you for that, because not everybody would be able to go down the rabbit holes that you did of investigation in this kind of way.
I've had my dark period. I mean, I was probably depressed for probably the best part of a decade.
Yeah.
But talking about that window and 25 years or so.
Yeah.
And I think in part it's because a lot of, and it's sadly often the case, either witnesses to it have passed away, or, I mean, I know in the case of JFK, a lot of the witnesses, mysteriously died, within a short period of time. But I think that is also another reason why you're able to look at stuff with more of an open mind.
Yeah.
Is because I think they know that actually most of the people who really knew have perhaps passed away or aren't in a condition to maybe, be a threat, because, and that just on that last point, what frustrates me with the whole fight that it's always we have people advocating, but it's essentially a fight that the your victim family members have, whatever the event. What I find really sad and must be so frustrating for the families is when you've lost a child, but you're already quite old. You're then looking at this 25, 30-year period and you pass away before you see any truth or justice.
Yeah.
And we've seen that with Bloody Sunday. I don't think
That's
a
right.
single parent was alive when they had the limited prosecution, which is just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because obviously they spent a long time fighting for that.
That's right.
And equally, but to a lesser extent with Hillsborough. And again, we're now going to see it with 9/11, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of the victim family members I know in the UK, some on side, some not with me, they're in their late 80s now. You know, some are with me, but don't have the energy to come and fight.
Absolutely.
They're just, and it's hard because you are constantly reopening stuff.
That's right.
I've managed to deal with, depression and just the enormity of what I've learned over the years. And I'm still relatively young. And so I'm going to continue fighting. But good God, I really hope I'm not. I said it yesterday. My poor old mum, 80 years old, with me at the High Court. I'm at her age she was when my brother died. I don't want to be in a courtroom still fighting for truth and justice when I'm 80.
That's right.
I don't want another 25 years to pass.
Yeah.
So I just really hope that the momentum that seems to have really gathered steam this year.
Yeah.
The legal efforts I'm doing and everyone is trying to do, the firefighter initiatives and stuff.
Yeah.
And whether we get an 9/11 commission or whether we do an independent inquiry, I just hope it starts to move. As I said, it's that sweet spot now. And that's my hope, that we get some form of truth and justice.
Yeah. And I mean,
So
there was a great presentation just before you came in, actually, on the use of FOIAs and subpoenas, like from a lawyer,
Mick Harrison,
about how to, if you're interested in this, like how to start subpoenaing for this data, how to have subpoena the subpoena that was put forth to unredact the 28 pages, things like that.
I mean, I know very much David Cole, who you mentioned, who's done a lot of FOIA requests. I mean, I've done loads as well. Particularly to the FBI and to NIST, and it's just so frustrating. I'm sometimes FBI is something different, but I'm there contacting NIST and just thinking, why are you blocking this? You must see that this is just so ridiculous. It took me over a year to get hold of the structural diagrams of the core. So the external structure of the towers was available and public, but why is it taking 13 months? They're all electronic, just boom, there you go.
Yeah.
But anyway, we get into a whole bunch of stuff, but FOIA's doing stuff through the courts, doing whatever the lawyers committee are doing is and sadly it's necessary to do that because there is this reluctance, or they've been ordered, you do not release this until absolutely gun to your head, you have to release it.
Much like the JFK files, where it's like it's going to be 50 years. There's normally that 50-year gap because they want anybody who may have been involved with the investigation so that nobody goes and does reciprocity against them, things like that. They want to make sure that those things are in the clear. And it's much like we say regularly with Tuesday, the UFO hearings happened here in DC, the third set of them. And it's the idea of, if you think they're going to wheel out a gurney with a body under a cloth and give you the Houdini moment, that's not going to happen. What's going to happen is a legal battle whereby which we find out where the money went. Same thing with, Iran-Contra. They didn't wheel a missile out and a pile of drugs. They brought in a dude in an army uniform who put his hand up and said, yes, I was in charge of this. This is what happened. Through legal means. So through legal means is how we find our justice. That's how we bring it to the floor of Congress through people like Dennis Kucinich, who was here. Things like that. Having people like that on board. And once again, 25 years later, people who maybe had a couple questions but were hushed by their congressional constituents at that point, now have a voice in a different way because they are no longer in that office, but still hold that weight and still have that connection and can still pull those strings and be like, hey, we tried to say something 25 years ago. We have a lot more data now. This needs to be reopened. And those are the beautiful means by which, both in the UK and here in the US, that we can leverage our legal system to begin to get truth and justice for the victims and people like you, the families, Matt. So On the way out, what words would you have for other family members, other people that have been suffering like you and may not be able to confront some of these very, very hard truths that are out there about this situation? And not necessarily the hard conspiracies, but the hard truths, things like, why we went to a false war, that their families were killed in something that brought about huge false pretenses to other things. What advice would you give to them?
It's hard because people grieve differently, and they're at different stages of grief, and I'm always very wary of when I'm speaking to someone who has gone through a similar process and experience that I have. It's kind of like if they want to. Some people are born fighters. Some people have just that's the way they are. I mean, I can just look at my own family. So myself and my mum are, we want to know everything, and we're the only ones in. My dad and my younger brother Rob didn't view or hold my brother's remains. They just want to remember him how he was. And so we've got different ways in which we handle stuff in our own family. Yeah. And, my dad, even though he's an architect and knows Building 7's crazy, he doesn't really want to go there. Yeah. And so I've got a kind of respect for that with whoever I talk with, who's lost somebody in 9/11. So to answer your question, I don't really know how I would, and it's not convinced because you're not asking me that. It's like,
that's absolutely
how would I talk to them about it? I don't know. I would probably have to wait for them. They've something's piqued their interest because you don't know whether they want to go back into that, because some people, whether it's truly healed or not, you absolutely will reopen stuff.
That's right.
If you go back into this.
I said that yesterday. You pull that Band-Aid, the scab will come with it. Yeah. You will reopen the wound,
and you may create new ones because, like I said, going back to that first article that I read, this is being done in my son's name. I think was what the family member said, and it's like you might start to feel really guilty for, like, oh my God, under that false pretext, all these servicemen and women, all these civilians, all these people have been killed through something that actually wasn't the case. They weren't they weren't involved, and so I mean that's a fresh wound to confront. So I get it. So I'm kind of reticent to really to speak with families, but if they want to,
if they're open to it, you're there with data.
But I won't be the one to prod them.
Yeah. Well, good for you. Yeah. And with that in mind, do you have your information online anywhere? Is there anywhere that people can go to find you, to find out more information? If there's other people in the UK whose family members passed and have come up against the same inquisition as you that was denied, are you there to help? How can they get a hold of you?
Sure. I mean, to my knowledge,
move this process forward?
There's only a few of us. There's only 67 British victims, and I'm in contact with a kind of support group of about 20.
Oh, wow.
And like I said, there's a couple.
That's a good percentage.
A couple of them are on side with what I'm doing, but they don't want to do anything publicly.
Yeah.
So in terms of following me and my case, on X, my handle is Matt Campbell. That's MATT Campbell 911. And alternatively, Ted Walter at the International Centre for 9/11 Justice, the ic911.org, is a great way of following my case, because you've got long form articles and all that kind of stuff.
And
way more detail that I can put on my
scans of
on
the
my
actual documents you've received, things like that.
Some because of the way the UK law works slightly differently. Not everything's in front of you. So once you file, a lot of it's actually hidden until the outcome of a case. So it is slightly different, but there are certain documents that I've made public. I mean, certainly the letters of refusal, etc., from the Attorney General. We can post those. Yeah. And I tend to go through my barrister, that's my lawyer in the UK, just to make sure, am I allowed to talk about this? And
absolutely,
because I'm a claim. Well, actually, I'm an appellant now because I'm going through the appeal system. But I've got to be careful because I'm in litigation, and there's weird rules in the UK about trying to influence cases and stuff.
Any lawyer here would give you the same advice of, you can talk about your personal experience. Let's leave some of the details, much like the AG. Let's leave some of those details in the background so that we still have them in the holster for court. Because otherwise you put them out there. That's a point of strategy that you're now revealing to them that they can circumvent around you with. And you definitely don't want that for you or the other family members. So I want to thank you so much for your time today, Matt, for your candid conversation here, as well as the presentation that you gave. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it.
Been good.
Fantastic.
Cheers.
While you were online finding all the information about Matt Campbell at the International Center for 9/11 Justice at ic911.org, make sure to also stop on by the website of Richard Gage, richardgage911.com. When we come back from this quick commercial break, everybody, make sure to... when we come back from this quick commercial break, we will be continuing our coverage of Turning the Tide 9/11 Justice right here in Washington, D.C., right after this, folks. The key to good science is good research. At the heart of good research is a good data set. With the field observation and encounter log from Curious Research, you can easily keep track of your investigative information all in one place, making it easier to review cases and readily see comparisons and contrasts between them. Whether out in the woods squatching, in a back room gathering EVPs, or using high-tech gear to track UFO, UAP activity, this easy-to-carry, pocket-sized scientific data log is the perfect companion for any field researcher. You can find your copy of the Curious Research Field Observation and Encounter Log at Amazon.com or visit the official Curious Realm store at curiousrealm.com/store to reserve your copy for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is curiousrealm.com/store.